Uh, Good morning to you all. Thank you. Honorable members, members of the Electoral Commission and staff, members of the media and public, ladies and gentlemen, a very good morning to you all. And it's a pleasure to welcome everyone, especially for the viewers that are watching this session. For the information of everyone this morning, pursuant to Standing Order 111 of the Standing Orders of Parliament, all committee meetings are to be open to the public. Therefore, please note that this public hearing is open to the public and media and is also being aired live on television in the Parliament channel on Walisi platform and Parliament's social media platforms and website. For any sensitive information concerning this inquiry that cannot be disclosed in public, this can be provided to the committee either in private or in writing. However, please be advised that pursuant to Standing Order 111, there are only a few specific circumstances that allow for non-disclosure, and these include national security matters, third-party confidential information, personal or human resource matters, and deliberations, and development of committees, recommendation, and reports. At the outset, I wish to remind honorable members and our witnesses that all questions to be asked are to be addressed to the chair. This is a parliamentary inquiry, and all things said and information gathered is protected under the Parliamentary Powers and Privileges Act. In terms of protocol of this committee hearing, please be advised that movement within the meeting room will be restricted, no usage of mobile phones, and all mobile phones to be on silent mode while the meeting is in progress. I would like to, at this time, introduce the members of my committee. Myself as Deputy Chair, Rohit Ritesh Sharma. On my left is Honorable Dr. Salih Govind. On near left, Honorable Ratu Suliano Matmitambua, who are with us this morning. And joining us virtually is Honorable Moses Bulitabu from Lambasa. Today, the committee will be hearing submission on the election-related bills that are with the Parliament, namely the Electoral Amendment Bill 2020, the Electoral Registration of Voters Amendment Bill 2020, and the Political Parties Registration Conduct, Funding and Disclosures Amendment Bill 2020. And before us, we have commissioners of the Electoral Commission who are present this morning to submit on the mentioned bills. And I now invite the commissioners of the Electoral Commission to introduce themselves and to make its submission. Please also note that if there are any questions by the members of the committee, they may interject, or we will wait till the end of your presentation to ask our questions. Please, you may start.
Thank you very much, Deputy Chairperson. On my left is Mr. Mohammed Sanim, the Secretary to the Electoral Commission and Supervisor of Elections. And next to me is Ms. Kavita Raniga, and we have Selina and Mr. Nenduki as the commissioners. The chairperson and the honorable members of the standing committee, Bola Vinaka and warm greetings from the Electoral Commission. On behalf of the Electoral Commissioners, I would like to present our submission on the following bills. Number 1, Bill number 50 of 2020, Bill to amend the Electoral Act 2014. Number 2, Bill number 51 of 2020, Bill to amend the Electoral Registration of Voters Act 2012. And number 3, Bill number 52 of 2020, Bill to amend the Political Parties Act 2013. General comments. Firstly, the Electoral Commission welcomes this move by the Parliament to review the laws governing elections. We are in the middle of the electoral cycle, and the FEO will shortly commence the full-scale preparation for 2022 general election under the guidance and supervision of the Electoral Commission. We also wish to highlight that it is regarded as the best practice to make changes to electoral laws well in advance of an election. The Electoral Commission also notes the efforts to reform some of the prescribed procedures in the laws to make them consistent practically with the international norms and such activities. Following the 2018 general election, the Electoral Commission and the Supervisor of Elections issued a joint report. In the joint report, we made various recommendations in the legal and operational frameworks. The rationale for recommending such changes was that we have had 2 general elections under the framework, and it is suitable time for us to determine which of the projects, policies, and procedures are practical and contextually relevant in Fiji's election system. Having had the opportunity to pursue the 2018 joint report with the recommendations of the electoral framework, together with the MOG report on the same election, Parliament is at the central position to make high-level policy decisions to reflect on the legal framework so that the next general election, having been held under and duly considered laws, not only raises the standards in the delivery of the elections, but further strengthens the core of our democracy. The Electoral Commission has taken the strategy to analyze each of the recommendations against the current amendments in Parliament. The committee is invited to refer to page 25 of the 2018 joint report, from which the Electoral Commission has recommended various practical reforms for Parliament. We shall address each of the recommendations and how the legal framework is being reviewed in light of the recommendation. Number 1, the voter list. The Electoral Commission had recommended that the law is amended to require the FEO to publish provisional voter list at least 18 months before the first date the writ can be issued. Section 40, subsection 8 of the Electoral Act is being amended to require that the provisional voter list is published annually on or before 30th September each year. It is Electoral Commission's view that this amendment will allow political parties to work with the FEO to verify and update the voter lists. Number 2, the polling venues. The Electoral Commission recommended that the law is amended so that FEO proposes the full list of polling venues for the next general election at least 2 years prior to the first date the writ can be issued. Section 41(7) now requires the SOE to identify the physical locations of all polling venues and submit the list of all such venues to the Electoral Commission for approval by 30th June every year. Section 41(8) requires that Electoral Commission to publish the approved list of venues within 30 days of the receipt of list by the SOE. This amendment provides that SOE with an approved list of venues to register voters during the election period, election cycle. The political parties which will have conclusive idea on the number of venues on the annual basis. Number 3, overseas voters. The Electoral Commission recommended that a polling arrangement is made for voters who had registered overseas and are in Fiji but did not apply for postal voting to be able to vote. Section 41(9) now allows the Supervisor of Elections to establish a polling venue in Suva for voters who are registered overseas but are not postal voters to attend to cast their vote, and special procedures for the conduct of polling and such polling stations as approved by the Electoral Commission. The introduction of provision allows the FEO to facilitate franchise for voters who may have traveled to Fiji after the issue of writ to able to vote. I would also allow any voter, it will also allow any voter that may have missed the deadline for postal voting to travel to Fiji and cast their vote. Number 4, the voter instruction booklet. The Electoral Commission and both the MOG from 2014 to 2018 had recommended that the national candidates list that is given to every voter when they come to vote should contain political party information. In the joint report, the Electoral Commission suggested that the candidates of the parties are listed according to their party. The MOG had recommended that the restrictions on party identification in the national candidate list is removed. Section 36(6) has removed the restriction on the political party identification, and it now allows SOE to determine whether it contains the political party name or symbol or any other information as the SOE approves. This amendment by the Parliament will allow a voter to identify their candidate by the party. Since nominations in Fiji are by party lists, and also considering that the electoral system is based on parties, having the symbols or names of the parties on the national candidate list will make the process more consistent. Number 5, a definition of campaign period. The Electoral Commission recommended that the campaign period is defined in the law for effective monitoring and implementation of the laws. MOG had recommended that the law should clarify the start and finish of the campaign period. Section 109A has been inserted in the law, and it clearly defines that campaign period as starting not earlier than 30 days before the completion of 3 years, 6 months from the first sitting of the Parliament after the last general election, and ends no later than 48 hours prior to the date of the general election. It is the view of the Electoral Commission that it is essential essential amendment and will clarify campaign laws and the enforcement of the rules relating to campaign. The setting of a proper time frame also allows all stakeholders to prepare for election. Number 6, the use of state resources. It is necessary to prohibit the use of state resources in the case of campaign. Section 1134A makes it unlawful to use government vehicles to conduct campaign. The Electoral Commission notes that in 2018, the media highlighted one candidate who went to his official vehicle to campaign in Cunningham. The change in the law is welcome, particularly in terms of leveling the playing field. Number 7, enforcement of blackout period. The Electoral Commission recommended that the law allows powers for the SOE to enforce campaign blackout and to allow the SOE to issue directives to remove campaign material that is in breach of the law. Section 1164A authorizes SOE to remove or to direct any political party, candidate, or police officer to remove any material that is in breach of the campaign rules. Section 1164B introduces offenses for failure to comply with the directives. The Electoral Commission is of the view that it was necessary for particularity that sake that the election management body was able to take immediate action to enforce the blackout period. The current amendment will provide the necessary mechanism to protect the voters. Number 8, the provisional results. The Electoral Commission recommended that the provisional results for the election are published by the SOE until 7 a.m. on the day following the election. The Commission notes that there are no specific provisions in this regard, although the SOE has been releasing provisional results until 7 a.m. the day after polling in 2014 and 2018. Section 102 of the Electoral Act will allow SOE to publish the provisional results until 7 a.m. the day after polling. Provisional results are a necessity in developing democracies, as it signifies the progress in count and helps to build peace and calm in the stakeholders. These results are normally received through phone or electronically and are intended to be indicatory only. Number 9, the final report on the general election. The Electoral Commission, considering the experiences in the 2014 and 2018, recommended that the final report for the SOE on the general election is to be due at least 3 months after the general election. Section 109 is amended to allow SOE to provide the final report on the general election within 3 months after general election. This amendment facilitates the compilation of the final report after the conclusion of the petition period, which is 42 days, 21 days to file and 21 days for their decision. It was difficult in 2018 for the SOE to compile final report while election petitions were pending in session in court. Number 10, the political party disputes. The Electoral Commission recommended for Parliament to allow it to mediate or, if necessary, arbitrate disputes between political parties. Section 30A of the Political Parties Registration, Conduct, Funding and Disclosures Act has introduced dispute resolution process in the law. The decision of the Electoral Commission on whether to mediate or to arbitrate is final and is not subject to any further appeal or review by any court, tribunal, or any other adjudicating body. This critical amendment introduces expeditious dispute resolution mechanisms between political parties. In an election, timelines are essential, and taking legal action may not fit within the expected timelines of the election. Proceedings in the court may give desired outcome, but the event may have passed its necessity. So, additional comments. Number 1, the Electoral Commission welcomes the reintroduction of appeals and objections provisions in the Electoral Registration of Voters Act. These provisions complement the amendment to the Electoral Act, where SOE is now required to publish the provisional voter list annually. The changes in the annual disclosure requirements of the political parties now requires registered political parties to file and publish their own disclosures annually basis. The law further enhances the self-compliance of political parties. Number 3, the Electoral Commission also notes the introduction of laws regarding the publication of false information on the election. In 2018, a political party official was found guilty of publishing false information regarding voter lists. The new amendment in Section 144A will allow electoral authorities to take action to prevent further publication of false information. These provisions promote fairness in election and also protect voters. It is also noted that the amendments in the Electoral Registration of Voters Act have made provision for the voter card, one of the most prominent ID cards in Fiji. Thus, SOE is required to issue every voter who is registered with the voter card. All voter cards remain the property of FEO. The law has also required voters to select their polling venue at the time they apply for the registration. Voters are also required to select an alternative polling venue. However, the voter will only be able to vote at the polling station they are registered to. The new provisions of the Electoral Registration Voters Act greatly improves the transparency in the management of the National Register of Voters. The amendments now require the SOE to publish the National Register of Voters. This will be done on provisional voter list under the Electoral Act. SOE is also required to publish the list of voters who will be deleted from the NRV. Number 6, prior to these amendments, candidates to the election were required to file their disclosures with the SOE 30 days before the current election, but there are no requirements to provide any disclosures after the election. The new amendments now require candidates to an election to file a second phase of disclosures after the general election as well. This will allow all stakeholders to verify the pre- and post-election disclosures of the candidate. Additional recommendation. The Electoral Commission has since 2018 continued its task to review and analyze the electoral environment. The Commission has considered various events and have collectively formulated the view that Section 7 of the Electoral Act be amended and the penalty provisions are introduced for any person or entity except the court for interfering or attempting to interfere with or directing or attempting to direct the SOE and the Electoral Commission in the performance of its functions of the SOE or Electoral Commission. Overall, the Electoral Commission's view is that the amendments to the laws are well designed, and these amendments will further strengthen the electoral system. We duly welcome the introduction of provisions with that enhances the transparency in the election management. These are some provisions that will rationalize the electoral process over the full 4-year cycle rather than only in the election year. In conclusion, we support the proposed amendments to the laws and we welcome the timeliness of the Parliament introducing the amendments. Vinaka.
Thank you very much, sir, for your timely submissions. I have a question, and I have the recommendation by the MOG for the 2018 general election here with me. And I would like to ask the Electoral Commission whether if you have considered these recommendations by MOG, and one of them is this is regarding concerning the campaign period. Develop guidelines for the conduct of members of parliament and the bureaucracy when the government is in caretaker mode to reinforce public confidence in a level electoral playing field.
The supervisor of elections is fully aware of what we have done. I think he can make comment on that.
No problem.
Thank you, Chair. In terms of the caretaker conventions, that's basically what is being referred to by the Multinational Observer Group. These are conventions that are generally developed by the governing party. And the Electoral Commission does not have any jurisdiction in that regard. However, there are some additional provisions in the current amendments that will lead to some clarity. For instance, the introduction of the period during which campaign laws are effective is now going to be properly defined by the Electoral Commission. So once the campaign period is defined, a lot of the activities will have to be mindful of the campaign defense provisions. There are a lot of restrictions in terms of usage of state resources and state officials, and those who are holding such offices will be required to be very mindful of how they execute their tasks during the campaign period.
Thank you very much, sir. I'll give this opportunity to our members if we have any clarification or any questions. Doctor? Honorable Mosese?
I just have one question, Honorable Chair. I just wanted to know that regarding these overseas voters who missed the postal ballot and are in Fiji, so there will be, they suggested only one venue in Suba. So anyone living in Lambasa or anywhere, they have to come to Suba to vote.
Yeah,
Is that a suggestion?
Yes, that's a procedural aspect of it. The supervisor of elections can comment on that.
The idea is that those who are living overseas, and have registered to vote as an overseas voter, but they haven't applied for a postal vote by some reason. Once they know the election date, they can still come and vote by traveling to Fiji. And even if they are in Fiji and they've missed the deadline for applying for postal vote, they can vote at a centrally organized polling station. Most likely it will be at the Civic Center in Suba, and they can come and vote at that location. We have had situations where people who were initially registered overseas, but during the election they were in Fiji, and they had not applied for a postal vote. So this amendment caters for their constitutional right to be able to vote. It can also apply to people who missed the deadline for postal vote, and then they find out that the election is happening at a particular time, and they are willing to come down to Fiji. They can come and do so.
Honorable Chair, I just have one more question. Now the IT technology is so advanced. Have you ever given thought that any voter can register, can go and vote at any station? Or that's not possible? So during last election, many voters were turned down when they came to the polling station. Their names were not there, and there was a lot of problems. So is it not possible for any voter who is registered in the system and he goes to a polling station and just click on the computer and see his registration and let him vote there? Why is not possible?
The supervisor.
So the concept of being able to vote at any polling station is a very attractive concept. In terms of preparations leading up to such a system, there are a lot of things that have to be done. I will explain to you with the examples from the 2006 election, which was an election where you could vote anywhere in the country. First and foremost, they had to print over 1 million ballot papers for around 400,000 voters. This is because they had to anticipate contingencies for larger turnouts in locations, and they had to send extra ballot papers to all the polling stations. And then there was reports that ballot papers were found at the seawall in Nasese because it was dumped there. Additionally, when you have a situation like that where you're printing additional ballot papers, the ballot papers that are printed all have to be reconciled. So right now, when I announced in 2018 that we will be printing roughly 770,000 ballot papers, immediately a lot of the political parties raised a call to say, why so many? if you have a system where you can vote anywhere, by my estimates, we have to print close to 1.4 million ballot papers to be able to react to a sudden surge in the number of voters at any particular venue. One of the largest polling venues in the country is Rishikul Primary in Nasinu. About 2,500 voters are catered for at that location. However, sir, should we have a system where you can vote anywhere, if all the residents in that area, which is now currently catered for by 3 different schools, decide to walk up to Rishikul, you will have a huge line of voters lining up to vote, number one. Number two, not all voters may be able to vote that day because the line was so big. Number three, whilst the voters now have an opportunity to be able to vote anywhere, they might actually turn around and go back home because the queue is so long. In the 2006 report of the Electoral EU Observer Mission, they highlighted that a lot of the people didn't vote because the queues were very long. And they actually recommended for the Electoral Commission to find ways to shorten the queue. The current system has a maximum now of 650 voters per polling station. There are multiple polling stations in a polling venue. You take out your voter card and you see your name on your voter card and your polling venue on the voter card. You can be rest assured that you are going to join maximum number of maybe 649 people to line up at one polling station which has been reserved for you with your ballot paper reserved for you at that polling station. You can go at any time of the day and vote until 6 p.m. In the last election, a lot of our staff reported that by midday, the number of people had finished or nobody came after midday. When we did the survey, the maximum amount of time people reported having spent at voting, majority said less than 10 minutes. And the survey has been tabled as part of the Electoral Commission's 2020 report. So, aside from the complications of printing massive amounts of ballot papers, having massive queues at certain polling stations and no queues at all in others, the other complication with such a system, which is possible through the voter database that we have, the other complication is the contingency transportation that we have to have. Because the election is a public holiday, people could say, right, we will all go for a picnic. So we'll go and vote in Deoba and just have a picnic. So on election morning, the Fijian Elections Office will have to then consider the weather, consider what's happening, consider where the movement is, and then prepare maybe helicopters or vehicles to transport ballot papers to those locations which will have a huge surge of voters. All that considered, I will now turn to the reconciliation part of things. There are very strict procedures that we employ for the transfer of ballot papers. When we move ballot papers from the printing house to the FEO warehouse, it is escorted by police as well as political party agents. On the election day, when we have these different surges at different locations, we will be still in the business of transporting ballot papers from location 1 to location 2. In 2014, we had a black Kia rental vehicle in which the staff contracts were taken to various polling locations so that the staff could sign up those contracts. We only had 6 months to prepare for that election. And social media went viral saying ballot papers are being moved around. One politician was photographed holding, the one that I saw was he was holding a McDonald's wrapper, but I saw another picture where he was apparently holding a ballot paper saying, these are the ballot papers being moved around. But if that is the amount of viral information that can go because someone just saw a black vehicle with staff contracts, what kind of social media games we will see when we are actually moving real life ballot papers. We will have to have police backup for those ballot papers being transported. At the same time, political parties will want to escort those ballot papers. So they will also have to have a full-time contingency team present at our distribution center. I will also cover the point of counting. Right now, when we employ polling officials, they are aware that at the end of the polling process, they will be counting a maximum of 650 votes. With the situation where we are going to allow anybody to vote from anywhere, there will be more than one ballot box per polling station if we start to seal boxes the minute we reach 600 voters, 600 ballot papers. At the counting time, polling officials know that we have to open one ballot box and count 600 ballots maximum, 650 ballots maximum. In a situation where you can vote anywhere, polling officials at, say, Rishikul, again as an example, might have to count 6 ballot boxes. So the results will not be available that night. The results will be available in weeks' time. New Zealand, for example, when the New Zealand election took place, that evening, the results of the New Zealand election, the provisional results, were announced. But the formal results of the New Zealand elections were available 21 days after. The US election took place and the results of the US elections were formally validated in December. The election was in November, I think. In Fiji, we have the election and in 4 days' time, we give you the final results. And people still complain that the results came too late. On commentaries, if you notice, once we start entering final data, final results data, there were allegations that the final results data was delayed. But the reason for the final data being delayed is because none of the other countries in the world give you progressive count of the final data. You get, like in New Zealand, you had the provisional results on the night of the election, and after that, if you participate in the formal count, you will be able to get progressive data. It is not published on a daily basis. The Fijian Elections Office publishes it on a 6-hourly basis. And we continue to do so until the results are all entered in the system. With the vote anywhere system, you might have counting that goes on for a week. Because counting officials on the night of the polling have worked a 16-hour shift. After counting the first set of ballot boxes, we'll have to allow them to go home and rest. So the transfer of non-counted ballot boxes will have to be done to a secured facility. That secured facility will require police to monitor it. It will also require political party agents to be present 24/7 to verify that the ballot boxes are still safe and secure. In 2006, it was reported that ballot box materials were brought from polling stations, housed at a location identified opposite the Total service station in Flagstaff. They were sorted at that location, and then from there they were transferred to the counting center. So the complications outnumber at this point in time the benefits. And I might want to take you back to your comment about many voters were turned away. In fact, sir, the voter survey proves you wrong. When we looked at the voter survey and the people who had not voted, we asked them, why didn't you vote? Their first response was, I moved and I did not change my polling venue. So with all due respect to the common statement that, oh, voters were turned away, in Fiji, voters can't be turned away from their polling venues because you carry a very unique voter card number. And every voter that has a voter card number is assigned a polling venue. All you have to do is text your voter card number to 1500 and it will tell you what is your venue. If you go to your venue on that day and your name is not on the list, then the FEO is at fault. But if you didn't correct your venue with FEO in the first place, and you turn up at the closest school at your in your residence, and your name is not in the list, it is very well because you didn't update your details. And that is where the problem arose. So on election day, the FEO received a lot of calls. And there was one call from some teachers that were in Wainikoro, and they said, but we were told we can vote here. Nobody will ever tell anybody that you can vote at a place you are not assigned. We train our staff specifically on these frequently asked questions. And we have done 2 elections now to be able to tell. So going forward, the FEO is now actually writing down the person's polling venue on the voter card. So that on election day, your voter card is valid proof that you are to vote at that location. And we are urging voters to update their details, update the card, so that that detail is present in that card. In 2014, 84% of the people were able to vote at the same location. But in 2018, sir, we didn't move anybody out. So if persons went to that same location, they would have been able to vote. So that is the dynamics of a vote anywhere versus vote attendance voting, as well as a correction based on data produced from our survey as to why people were not able to vote on the day.
Thank you very much. Yes.
On the voter card, like I vote in my village, the last one. Can I use the same card or I have to renew?
All the voter cards that are green in color have to be upgraded to the blue colored voter cards. That has to be done. The green colored voter card does not have your polling venue details on it. And going into the next election, the voter will face the same dilemma. Where am I supposed to vote? But if you have the card that already tells you where you're supposed to vote, it takes away one part of your nervousness when you go to make the selection.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Salim. And I think we'll be available next week for a submission. So we'll have more questions on that. Honorable Moses, do you have any comments or anything?
Through you, Honorable Deputy Chair. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Chairperson, Commissioner, and also the fellow commissioners and the Supervisor and Registrar for political parties. I think you've covered a lot there, and most of the points that you've covered there were raised from our public consultation, and you provided us with the justification on why there needs to be a specified polling station that you need to be registered on, and not the open base system where you can vote anywhere. And I think the Secretariat has noted the justifications and the difficulties that it poses in terms of logistics, etc. On the issue of the overseas voters that will be voting in Fiji on a centralized polling station, I think there were questions raised by some during our public consultation. Why only in Suva? Given there would be some people who in the same situation could be attending a funeral or any other thing coming from overseas in Lambasa or in the West. But I think just to give us some justification on how we will be able to answer those questions when we come again next week through our public consultation when we move around with the bills again to the Western Division. Those were some of the things. The other thing that came up was the probably the transportation on that day, given some members of the public addressed the difficulties in transport and moving into our polling stations. If there is any arrangements currently being done with public vehicle transport providers with the Fiji Elections Office to enable voters to travel on that day, given that we can have that assurance to when we go around and we relate it to them.
Thank you, Honorable Mosese. Thank you, Commissioners. I have a final question. And if you look at the bill and clause 36, it says section 153 of the Principal Act is amended by deleting records in relation to an election 1 year and substituting physical records in relation to an election 6 months. Now, my question is, what is the intention behind this provision? And also, what does records mean in relation to this Electoral Act and the provision?
Yes, thank you, Deputy Chair. I think there is some justification for it, and the supervisor is aware of that procedural aspect of it. Yes, so he can explain.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Chair. It's another procedural question. The records being maintained for 1 year, the primary reason for it is to allow for court petitions to be completed. We looked at the rules for court petitions, and it is noted that a petition must be filed within 21 days, and thereafter the court must make a decision within 21 days. So basically, the documents need to be maintained for 42 days because the court may need to venture into one of those documents. Thereafter, the documents are kept for record purposes like ballot papers. So the practice at the Fijian Elections Office is that for the period, the Fijian Elections Office keeps all the ballot boxes still sealed with all the materials in it for a period of 1 year. And in the last 2 elections, after the petition period expired, there was no activity on the materials that we would store. And there was considerable storage costs. We had to hire 19 containers because it can't be kept in an open warehouse. We have to keep it in containers, and we had sealed the containers, and the containers were being inspected on a monthly basis to ensure that the seals were still intact and new seals were applied for 1 year. The cost of maintaining such is extensive, and as well as the amount of area required to house 19 containers, we have to pay rental for all of that. So considering that the legal use of the documents expires after 42 days, effectively, the proposal was to reduce the storage from 1 year to 6 months. Previously, under the laws, there was no time frame for the election petitions to be determined within which, if I'm correct. And based on that, the materials had to be kept until all the petitions had been heard. And in the example of Papua New Guinea, some of the petitions from the 2000 and 2005 period are still pending in the Supreme Court. So they have to still keep those materials for those locations for the court's reference. But in Fiji, the petitions that were filed in the last election were withdrawn just before Christmas. And then the materials had to be kept for 1 year. And after 1 year, we were able to destroy all those records. We recycled it into recycled paper, toilet paper.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Sanim. Any of the commissioners who would like to have any final say or any comments before?
Just a general comment.
Yes.
It's about the date of election. You may have some influence in it. Last year, the last election we had it at the end of the year, during the rainy season. One thing that swayed the attendance we were going to vote was the red weather. And some of the proposals, I think we made proposals of the date of election during the next election. We would prefer to have it beginning of during the dry season, in April, May, those months. We leave it too late. I think if you had it in the early part of the year, during the last election, the percentage of people turning out to vote would have been higher.
Thank you.
Yeah. With your permission, Deputy Chair, we have a booklet which shows the party symbols being included in the voter list before the election. You enter the polling venue. So this is what I can give it to you. So.
Thank you very much.
Another copy for you.
Thank you very much.
We have not circulated that yet, but that's up to 2 copies.
Yes, that's for 2018.
This is for the 2018 election.
Yes.
Yeah.
This is for 2018 one, but the symbols are added on.
We've added the symbols to demonstrate what the amendment to section 36 will bring about. So the symbol of the party is now inserted next to the number. Then the name and the photo of the candidate is there.
Thank you very much, Commissioners. Finally, once again, I wish to sincerely thank you all for availing yourself for this inquiry. And we thank you for your time and hope that you will avail yourself for any further queries that the committee may subsequently have during its review of the bills. Thank you. Naka.
Thank you, Naka.